Okay, so welcome everyone. Let's get started here. This session was going to be about Switch and PDFToolbox. We're actually going to do two different things. First of all, I want to tell you what the possibilities are in Switch. And this has the risk of being relatively short if you don't ask questions or you have things that you wonder about. So feel free to speak up. So that's the first thing I want to do, is go over that. And then the second thing is I also wanted to give Jan the opportunity to talk about the apps he has on the Enfocus App Store for Switch that use PDFToolbox. Actually, if there is anyone else here who also has apps, then they should feel welcome to speak up at that point as well. I don't discriminate in any direction. So I think I recognize most names by now, but if you have not been here yet, this is not like a regular webinar. You can actually unmute yourself and speak up. If you don't figure out how to unmute yourself, then you can ask me to do it, and I will be happy to help. You can also, if you have questions and you don't want to speak up, or you don't feel comfortable asking in your language, then you can type in the chat window. If it's not one of the languages I master, it would be nice if you would do it in English. I can probably handle Dutch, French, English, German, and a little bit of Spanish. So anything else you have to translate. Okay, so Switch and PDFToolbox. I'm assuming that everyone knows PDFToolbox. If not, then this is going to be a very weird session. So Mark doesn't know PDFToolbox. I will teach you afterwards, Mark. So there are a number of different versions of PDFToolbox. And if you go to our website, you'll actually see 4. The main reason you see 4 of them is for marketing. There are actually only 3 if you want to look at it from a technology point of view. There is a desktop app, which of course is standalone and allows you to edit PDFs and create profiles and so on. Then there is something called PDFToolbox Server on the website and something called PDFToolbox CLI. That is it's the same version from a technical point of view, but typically when we say PDFToolbox Server, we refer to the hot folder variant. So that is what uses hot folders to process files. If there is something called CLI, if we talk about PDFToolbox CLI, it's the command line version, which is typically integrated with things like web portals and stuff like that. So things on the web or in scripted environments. And it is this CLI version that is also used in Switch or automated by Switch. And then there is an SDK, and SDK stands for Software Development Kit, which is the version that developers can use to integrate it into a larger application. You can also use the SDK on the web. For example, there is a .NET wrapper for the SDK, which some people prefer to integrate PDFToolbox into an environment where they already have a website that uses .NET. Although it has to be said that even in such environments, in most cases, people would use CLI. And my advice is certainly to people to use CLI because it's easier. There is a bit of error handling that is done already by PDFToolbox and so on. What we need for Switch is PDFToolbox CLI. I always get the question from people whether Switch is able to automate PDFToolbox desktop. I agree that would be very nice from a commercial point of view, but no, Switch needs solutions that can be automated, and for PDFToolbox, that means it has to be the CLI version. Yeah, so you have to purchase CLI or server, and in order for it to be the most comfortable, you have to install PDFToolbox on the same machine as Switch. As you know, I'm assuming when you come to this session that you also know what Switch is. Again, if not, this might be slightly strange. But if you want to work with Switch, the easiest way to work with third-party applications is using the configurators. And in order for a configurator to work, it's not strictly true, but for most configurators to work, including PDFToolbox, which is also not strictly true, it has to run on the same machine as Switch. So that's the default setup. And when you have it on here, then you will see that this nice configurator will give you 5 different PDFToolbox based configurators. So there is not just one configurator for PDFToolbox. What you get is 5 different things. I always tell people there are 4. That is because the next thing I tell them is that they should not use this convert color thing, because I think there are better ways of doing that. But if you look in the list of tools, flow elements, then you'll see 5 different configurators. And we'll go over all of them and explain why you should use them and what they do. Before I go there, let me start by saying one thing already. So you can go to the configurator stuff in Switch, and now you can update to the latest version. A very common question when there is an update for PDFToolbox, for example, we went from 10 to 11. A very common question would be, is there a new configurator for version 11, and where do I find that? Usually there is a waiting period or a period between a release of PDFToolbox, a major release of PDFToolbox, and a release of a new configurator, if there is a new configurator at all. Yeah. In general, it is so that PDFToolbox is, I guess you call that backwards compatible. I always get the direction wrong there. But what that means is if I have PDFToolbox 10 and I use that in workflows and I build those in Switch, and then I install PDFToolbox 11, then PDFToolbox 11 is also going to be able to handle everything I did in that version 10 workflow. So in general, you do not need a new configurator for that. The new configurator is only needed when there is new functionality in PDFToolbox that needs to be exposed towards Switch. For example, we'll talk about actions. If there is a new action that Callas invents and puts in PDFToolbox, then you need to have an update to the actions configurator in order for that to be exposed in the easy to use interface. So that was one thing I wanted to say. The other thing, of course, is it is not because you install PDFToolbox 11 that all of a sudden Switch is going to start using PDFToolbox 11, which is a very good thing. That's not what you typically want in a production environment. You want things to stick with what works. But there is a way to change that, of course, and most of you will already know that as well. You can right-click on a configurator and then say set path to application, and then search for the application. You can also do search for application. I like to use this one because that at least has the advantage of letting you see what you're actually doing. So in this case, it goes to PDFToolbox Server 11. So it is pointing to the latest version. If I would install version 12, which does not exist yet, you have not missed that announcement. I'm just inventing it. So if I would install PDFToolbox Server 12, then I would have to go here and point Switch to the version 12 install. Be very careful. If you go to the folder where you have PDFToolbox Server installed and you point to this application, which is at the highest level of that folder, then you're actually pointing Switch to the desktop application. And lo and behold, that's not going to work. Yeah? And then you will have to write support and say, oh, it doesn't work, and this new version is not good, and whatever. Actually, this one here, the one called PDFToolbox on Mac, inside of the CLI folder is the one you want to point to, that is the command line application. That is a little bit clearer here on Mac because the names are different. If I'm not mistaken, on Windows, it's more confusing because the names are very similar or completely similar. So you have to make sure that you point to the application that lives inside of the CLI folder. That is the version that can be automated by Switch. Yes, so that is one. Yeah. And then when you install it on the same machine as Switch, you will get, like I said, these 5 configurators that I pulled from the flow elements. So just search for PDFT and it will show you all of them in the menu here. And each of those has a different purpose, obviously. So let's look at why you want to use each of those. I'll start with the easy one. And I don't know whether that's the same advice that Mark would give, for example, but I always tell people don't use convert colors. If you want to do something with colors, do it in a profile. That's where you can, in a modern world, that's where you can do all the color conversions together with everything else that you want to do in terms of checking and correcting files. Convert colors is based on some older configuration setup that I would no longer use. So we're going to start this by simply removing this one and pretending that never happened. So why is it then still in the installation? Well, of course, if someone starts using that and they have something that works, we can't break that workflow. So it's really hard to remove a configurator once we invented it at some point. I say we, identifying with Callas in this case. But because this was not a good idea to invent it, it was, of course, in this particular case, Callas's mistake to make it in the first place. So forget about that one. There are only 4 configurators: profiles, compare, actions, and impose. That's the ones that you should remember. The most important one, and the one that you see in, that you would probably use the most in workflows, is this PDFToolbox profiles one, which is used to run either profiles or process plans. Yeah? If you look in PDFToolbox, those 2 things look different, as you probably know. When it comes to executing them, comes to running them, there is no real difference for PDFToolbox. They can be used in both profiles and process plans can be used in a hot folder setup, for example. They can also both be used in this configurator. It doesn't matter whether it's a profile or a process plan. Of course, what does matter is that depending on what you're using, your output might be different because process plans are a little bit more complex or can be more complex than a profile. But those you execute in this profile configurator. The second one, and I will actually put them in order of what I consider order of importance, or order in which they typically end up in workflows. The second one is this actions configurator. And an action for PDFToolbox, you'll see that terminology in PDFToolbox desktop in the switchboard part. An action is something that you do with a PDF file that typically is not possible in a profile. So there are a few things that you can do in PDFToolbox, such as random examples, taking 2 PDF files and merging them together, taking a multi-page PDF file and splitting it into individual pages, taking a PDF file and converting it into images. So there are some things for which you don't really have a way to do them in a profile, but those things are available as actions. If you've ever run the CLI or did anything with the CLI in a scripting environment, then you will probably know that on the command line, you either choose to run a profile or you choose to execute an action. So that is the same thing here. The profile equivalent is this one. The action equivalent is the PDFToolbox actions one. Yeah. The third one, and I will look in a little bit more detail on these a little bit later, but the third one is PDFToolbox impose. as you undoubtedly know, PDFToolbox has an imposition engine built in, and PDFToolbox Impose allows you to address that imposition engine. So this is where you can specify a run list and a sheet config file, and potentially a template, and you can execute that on a PDF. And then the last one is probably the least known or the least used by people, is PDFToolbox Compare. And the Compare configurator allows you to run the comparison functionality between two PDF files. Now, why is this a separate configurator where PDFToolbox Actions is, well, normally Compare is also available in the command line under the Actions department, and to some extent that is the same for Impose, mostly because in both cases actually it is easier in the sense that then you have a dedicated configurator for that functionality. But for example, for PDFToolbox Compare, Compare includes multiple files. You have to have multiple files as inputs. Those are compared, and then you generate a report, and PDFToolbox will tell you whether the files are the same or not. PDFToolbox profiles will generally just process any PDF you throw at it. If you throw two PDFs into the profiles one or into the actions one, it will just pick them up and do something with each PDF individually. PDFToolbox Compare is set up in such a way that it works on a folder and does a comparison of the files in that folder. So the way of building that into a switch workflow is a little bit different. And while I'm sure you could find a solution for that and still do everything in the same configurator, I think in this case it makes sense to have these two separated out. Yeah. So all four of them, like I said, we've forgotten about the fifth one. All four of them work in the same way. In the background, they will launch PDFToolbox command line. They will do whatever you have configured them to do, and then they will give you a result. But what they do depends on where you want, what you want to do in a workflow. So let's start with the most common one, which is this PDFToolbox profiles one. And as you can see, there are lots of different properties that you can set. Yeah. So what does this do? Well, first of all, of course, just about any other configurator in Switch, this has to be built into a workflow. So I have to send PDF files into here, and then I have to also do something with what comes out of PDFToolbox. Yeah? So you have ingoing and outgoing connections, very similar to everything else, where you can also set output levels. So I could make something which is very common, where like this. So everything that is a warning or an error coming out of PDFToolbox goes there, and everything that is an error goes in the other direction, and then you can start playing with colors, and that will indicate that. Whoever decided at Enfocus that red should not be a default color, yeah, pink is not the same as red. So I have an input, I have two output folders, and I have PDFToolbox. And it still gives me an error, because what you also have to do, of course, is you have to tell PDFToolbox what the profile is that you want to run, so profile or process plan, and you do that by selecting here. Now, I can say select from library in general, and there I'm not sure every advisor would be on the same level. In general, I tell people do not use select from library, select choose file. And that way you point to a particular file somewhere on disk. So these are just profiles that were exported somewhere. Select that file. The file, if you export this workflow, will be bundled with the workflow in Switch anyway. and transfer to the other machine, I find this much nicer than trying to work with this concept of library. The profile group is irrelevant if you select an outside file. So this is only when you also work with selecting from library. So usually what I do is I just point to an exported KFBX file. That means that you develop and keep and test the profiles or process plans in PDFToolbox Desktop. When they are ready or when you have an update, you export it and you just have to make sure that it overwrites this profile that lives somewhere. Normally, you don't have to stop a workflow and start it again in order for changes to the profile to be picked up, because this is the command line version, and it will, each time it runs, it will look at the profile anyway. In most cases, I don't trust that, and I do that anyway, but that's just me not trusting software in general. Yeah, but this allows me to pick a profile. So the file comes in, it's going to be processed, and it goes to an output folder or, well, one of the output folders, depending on the result you have here. So what else? Well, most of the command line parameters that make sense that you can use in the CLI version of the tool can also be set here. And it's just a little bit easier in some cases to configure them correctly, because you don't have to remember the syntax that you normally have to remember on the command line part. What is the most important? Well, of course, the most important in most cases is to remember to also generate a report. And what in PDFToolbox Desktop is called custom report is here called template. When I select that, it will ask me, when do you want to generate a template? Do you want the name of the report to have something at the end? Do you want to add this as a data set to Switch, or to the file as it moves through Switch rather? And what is the template that you want to use? And here again, I can say choose from library, or I can choose a folder. Usually again, I will choose a folder for that. So this is a folder with an HTML template inside that will be used for creating a report. Of course, when I generate a report, I would also have to add a log connection to that, and that could either be a separate connection for error or warning or success, or they could all go into the same connection. And I would have to do the same thing here to make sure that the reports are generated in the folder that I want as well. Yeah, so this. So now an outgoing file, a processed file, and the reports are going in a success folder, and an error file and an error report are going to the output, the other output for errors. And then you can choose in the workflow what you're going to do with that. It still gives me an error in this case because I've selected a template report, and I have not specified a template. So it's not happy. One way of fixing that would be to select a different type of reports so that I don't have to generate or specify anything else anymore. Now, while I'm saying that there are lots of properties in here, these properties are normally validated. And when you have a complex workflow with lots of different elements in there, it actually sometimes has its merits to switch off property validation if you think you know what you're doing, because that will save you some time on activating the workflow and so on. A word to the wise: if you switch off property validation, it means that properties are no longer validated. So if you make a stupid mistake, then that might show up as a processing error, so an error that occurs in the workflow itself where, of course, if you have the default and you let properties be validated, then a PDFToolbox configurator might be smart enough to tell you that you have something that is not going to work while you're still designing it and then activating the flow. But if you have a workflow that has been tested, you know it works, and you feel that it takes a long time to activate or specifically activate, then switching off validation is sometimes something that can save you some time there. Just be careful with it. So some other things that can be useful. First of all, you can generate multiple reports. Yeah, this is also possible in the on the command line. So I can specify up to 1, 2, 3, 4 different reports. This could be different types of reports. For example, a comment report and an XML report. But it can also be as simple as I want an English report and I want a I'll select something none of us can read, I think, a simplified Chinese report. So in this case, in my report outputs, whether it's error or success, I'm going to get an English and a Chinese one. And then it's probably also smart if I would make sure that they get a different name so that I recognize that well, I know which file is which, and I can process them further. Most commonly, of course, this is used for generating a PDF report that can be then shown to a user at some point, and as a second report, an XML report that can be used to automatically further automate the response that comes out of PDFToolbox. You can also embed the XML report as metadata, which is sometimes useful because that allows you to use scripting, for example, or the metadata module and the variable module to get stuff out of there. You could try this with the variable module without scripting. I think it is probably safe to say that the XML report is so complex that if you want to do something, you probably need scripting as well to handle that. Especially the kind of references that are used in the report, where you would get the ID of a fix-up, for example, that was run, but then you have to look up where this fix-up is and see what the name is and so on. That is something that is not terribly easy to do if you just have the metadata module to work with. Hell, it's not easy to do if you have scripting to work with. So I can run something in a PDFToolbox without running fixes. So if I have a profile with fixes and checks, then I can run only the checks in here if I want to. And then probably the most important other that I will just mention, because we have talked about this in another Café already when we talked about variables, is the way to have variables. So if I have a profile and that profile uses variables, perhaps because the processing you want to do is different. Maybe in one case you want to convert files to ISO-quoted, and in another case you want to convert them to ISO newspaper, depending on the way they're going to be used or printed afterwards. You can make a profile that uses variables to control that decision. Well, this property here, define variables for dynamic profiles, is what you would use to control that. And I will refer you to the Café on variables that we did before, but in general, what you have is you have the key of the, no, it's a colon here. It's different. You have to be very careful. It's different than what Switch uses in some other places. So basically, you have to specify key value. And if I have multiple variables in a profile, I can specify that in this way. So on each line, you have a key value pair. Key stands for key, meaning the part in front of the colon. is the name that PDFToolbox has for this variable, and what you type after the colon is the value that you are going to pass to PDFToolbox. Again, there is a recording of a Café where we talked about variables in PDFToolbox and then also how they can be used in Switch. I will refer you to that one. The recording is on the Facebook group. I will refer you to that one for more information about that. And then there are some other parameters. I'm just going to point out one last one because it can be sometimes handy. I already said that if there is a new version of PDFToolbox, this version 12 that doesn't exist comes out tomorrow, and Callas invents a new command line parameter, and they have not put it in the configurator yet, or there is a configurator, but it has not been validated by Enfocus yet. Well, sometimes you can work around that by providing that parameter then on the CLI parameter property here in Switch. So these are things that will be copied from what you specify here and will be added to the command line that is run behind the scenes. I told you that it is PDFToolbox command line, PDFToolbox CLI that is used to automate stuff. These things will be added on the command line there. Okay, so that is the profile configurator, and then of course the other ones all follow the same basic principle in that they have to be built into a workflow. Don't forget that also actions can fail. So if I start using the action configurator, I'm no longer dealing with profiles. So you could think, well, if it's just actions, I only need to care about the success output because it's just an action I'm doing. But even simple actions like, let's see, we have an action choice here. Let's see if we can find split PDF. So I have split PDF, I would have to configure it. And I could think in this case that that's always going to work well because, of course, it's only splitting a file in multiple PDF files. So what could go wrong with that? In a real workflow, everything that can go wrong does go wrong at some point. So if you have a file here that is not a good PDF file, for example, or something that is corrupt at some level or anything like that, your file might still be sent to the error connection from here. So it's good whenever you use an action to also make sure that you capture this and you do something with the error if that error happens. So don't forget that. What is the difference between actions and profiles? What I said at the beginning. So this is only profiles. This is all the other stuff that you can do. And if you look at the list of actions, that will show a lot of the same things as what you have in the switchboard, actually. So you have things like booklets, so the simple imposition stuff. Actually, impose is also here, I think, if I'm not mistaken. But there are too many things too many lines here to find it. But certainly the easy imposition stuff is here, step and repeat, and up, and booklet, and fill page. You have split PDF and merge PDF, save as image, some conversion things like to PDF and from PDF to image, or from PDF to PostScript and vice versa. There is a redistill in here, extract content. So all of these things that don't really fit into a profile, even though you have some tricks to use some of this in process plans by creating an action using the switchboard and then using that action in a process plan. Here you have them directly. And what is important here is that by selecting the action, the other properties that you have here will differ. So for splitting, I have to specify how this document should be split. If I would go to, let's say visualizer, for example, then you can see that I get a whole lot of different attributes because, of course, to drive the visualizer, you need different stuff than to drive a split PDF action. So the properties that you set up are depending on the action that you select. Once more, you can disable property validation when you're done and you're pretty sure that this works. And that, again, might save you some time when Switch activates flows and so on. Yeah, if someone has specific questions about specific actions, then feel free to enter them in the chat or just tell me. But I'm not going to go over all of them. There is documentation for these actions. Typically, also when you look at the CLI, they are all so the documentation for PDFToolbox CLI, all the actions are documented there with their parameters. Those correspond to what you find in here in Switch. So the explanation that you find there for split PDF, for example, is going to correspond to what you find here. The only difference is for PDFToolbox CLI, you would have to enter it on the command line. For the action configurator, you typically have properties in the configurator, so it's easier. Impose is an easy one that does the imposition. So what you see here is that you have properties to let you specify the run list and the sheet config, and then a sheet template in there, and that just drives the imposition engine. There is not much more to say about that. You can also use variables in here, and then you have the same way of specifying them, key value pairs on each line, and those will be passed to the imposition engine. Other than that, again, there will be an input and an output folder where the imposed file is going to be generated. Yeah, so whenever you want to do something with imposition, the impose configurator is the way to do that. And then the compare configurator is a bit of a special case in the sense that this will require a folder of files to come in, and then the files in that folder are going to be compared, and the result is exported to an output folder. What you have in that case is it's the same mechanism. So you have an outgoing connection that is a data connection where you can say, this is a file that is the same, and I have to set the folder connections correct. So I would have to say this one is error and this one is success. So if the file is the same, it will go to the success output connection. If there is a difference, a visual difference between the two files, it will go to the error output connection. It's not much more difficult than that. And then on top of that, I can also generate log connections, and those will get a comparison report that will show where the files are different. And then the properties, of course, let you set all the properties that you normally have on the command line as well to do comparisons. For example, what resolution you want to do that, offset, maybe just compare everything within the trim box or within a certain area of there, and so on and so on. So those things can be done. Not an area, just an offset in this case, I think. Yes, so profiles, actions, everything to do with impose, and then if you want to compare things, in all cases, you can combine as many of them in a workflow as you want, of course. Maybe one last note before I stop talking and I look at questions if anyone has them, but one last thought about performance. What happens here is a call to PDFToolbox command line. So each time you have a configurator, you actually start the command line version of PDFToolbox in the background. That means if you make a workflow that has a lot of different PDFToolbox things in it, and you very quickly end up with stuff like that, yeah, then each of them is going to be an invocation of the command line, which takes time. In many cases, it can be useful to think about, well, can't I combine certain things into one process plan, for example, and run that using a single PDFToolbox profiles configurator? That is certainly not going to be slower. If you build a workflow where you have 10 configurators and you are able to replace that with a workflow with 2 or maybe even 1 configurator in it that uses a process plan, that is always going to be faster than if you well, have the 10 steps in there. Both because every configurator means a launch of the CLI, but also because, of course, you have overhead from Switch itself. It has to wait for files until they are stable, has to pick them up. They will be moved to a different folder. It's only a move, but still it's disk I/O that you're doing. So it is preferable if you start having very complex workflows. It is really a good idea to think about, okay, so now that I know what I'm doing, is there something I could combine in less configurators and make this thing go a little bit faster? Of course, if you have a performance problem, I would always advise to just start with something that is the most easy to build and the most easy mostly to debug and see where the problems are, and only to optimize it further if you encounter a performance problem. If you're only going to process 10 files a day, even if the flow is very complex, that's not going to be an issue. Yeah. Okay. Any questions about that? Okay, so there is one question about Switch, but it's more a question, Christophe, about Switch itself, I think, rather than a question for about PDFToolbox. So the question was, what happens when Switch goes down, for example, if I understand this correctly. What happens when Switch goes down and how can you be notified about that? There is nothing in Switch that really gives a good notification about that. There is a watchdog application that is supposed to keep Switch alive. If that is not the case, then yeah, you have to look at processes. The only solution that I know of is looking at processes that are running on a machine. You can look at the watchdog process by itself, for example, and make sure that that is still running. Normally, if the watchdog is running, then the rest should be running as well. There are other possible ways of doing it. I'm a developer, so I always think of scripted solutions. You can, of course, make a small script in Switch that that requires no input, but would do I don't know, would connect to a database every so many seconds and say I'm alive, for example, or call some other service to say that they're alive. If that doesn't happen, then you know there is a problem with Switch. That sort of thing is possible. I actually wonder whether I can show you something that is, so you can make a script. This is a script. You can make a script that that has no inputs. This is one that cleans up folders. One of the annoying things with Switch is that for something to happen with a normal script, you have to connect a folder to a script, and in that case, Switch adds unique ID to all the files in it, and you don't always want that. So this is a cleanup script that will simply look at a particular folder and then clean up stuff. Yeah, you could do the same kind of thing, but yeah, as you said, you could write an email or have it send you an email every so much time. Or we have for someone else, we actually, I know there is an app for that on the App Store as well.
I have made an app called Webhook Warning that will waiting for webhooks.
Yeah, that would be exactly the kind of thing. Yeah, we
So
have a Slack
it
app
doesn't do anything
somewhere.
but waiting.
So the annoying thing is you have to you almost have to have an external system if you want to do it completely properly. You have to have an external system that is reset every time it gets a message, and if it doesn't get a message for longer than X amount of time, then it sends you an email. That would be the ideal. Yeah, having Switch send you an email every morning is, of course, will also work, but it means you get an extra email every morning, which I'm not sure you want. If you would push something to a webhook, like Jan said, every 5 minutes, and that webhook knows that if it doesn't get a message for longer than 5 minutes, that should send you, the service should send you an email. Then you have something that only will send you an email if there is a real problem. Yeah, yeah, as I said, you could do it with an email. We actually made a, but I'm not sure where I have it now. I have it somewhere. I have too many workflows already. We have a script that connects to Slack and sends a Slack message, for example, which well, you could use for that as well, same way. But all of the things you do in Switch are in the wrong direction, of course, because as long as you can do something in Switch, Switch is not down. It's when Switch is down that you want to do something. So you're always going to need an external system to be part of this as well. Okay, if you have other questions, either speak up or put them in the chat. But I am going to let Jan talk about the apps that he has on the App Store for PDFToolbox and Switch. I'm just think that I need to figure out how I can make you presenter, Jan, because I don't think you are allowed at the moment.
No, I'm disabled to screen share.
Yes, so let me try and figure out new share. I don't want that. No. Stop share, let's try that for a start. And then I think I need to give you permission to also do that. So all participants, okay, now try again and you should be able to share.
Yes.
Technology
now
is
you're
great.
Supposed to see my Switch.
Yes, we do.
Yeah. Well, what you see here to start with, it is a simple flow that makes stuff from Excel files. What we have here is really PDFToolbox, but if you are in a country like me with different characters than the normal A to Z, or in Germany, for example, with umlauts and stuff like that, or Eastern Europe or something, if you do this sending stuff to place content in PDFToolbox that has strange characters, they will become garbage. And it has something to do with how Switch send the commands to PDFToolbox. So you cannot blame Callas and you cannot blame Enfocus. There's somewhere in between there something happens. So anyway, but I made this app that sends a shell script to PDF, using a shell script to send the commands to PDFToolbox. And then it works with umlaut characters and stuff like that. So it's what we see here is really PDFToolbox.
This is an app that lives on the Enfocus App Store, right?
Yes, and it's free.
Look at that.
Yeah. But it's only available for Macintosh since the problem doesn't exist on Windows. So it's just a Macintosh font trouble issue.
Okay.
So what we have here is just the settings for the variables that we send to PDFToolbox. A lot of stuff that will then fit into the place content templates. So what we do here is we send an Excel file to this folder. There's another app that will convert Excel to XML. And there's an XSLT that's split it up in single files, so we can create one single PDF for each row in the Excel file. In this case, there's 2 sheets also in Excel file. So, and the variables that are used here are also, depending on the sheet, it will pick up different PDFToolbox profiles that select different place content templates.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a lot of different kind of variables that control this. And why doesn't it work?
Because this is a demo.
Yes, probably. We should have files there. It's just waiting. Maybe it's processing too much. Anyway, so we can in the meantime show how it looks in because the place content function in PDFToolbox is really useful for making variable stuff. I have changed the screens. Everything has moved away. Here we are.
Mm-hmm.
So here you see the variables that we get from Switch with the key and the colon and the value. In this case, there's some default values also and enter there. So if there's an empty value, you get them. And the place content is mainly run by JavaScript that picks up the variables and then place them in a div tag in the whole HTML file, and then just place the content on an empty PDF. So something has stopped there. I think Zoom is taking a lot of resources.
Yeah, I've seen that as well. It's and there's not much you can do about it, unfortunately.
I also have another flow that uses the same thing that have an Excel file with names and addresses and stuff for making business cards. And also here we can. This is a case I have at a couple of customers that use this. So this Excel file, the company that has to ordering the business cards, they keep this Excel file as the database for all the business cards. So they are responsible that everything is correct, all data is correct. And then when they want to order new business card they can have like 500 employees, but only 3 or 4 new business cards. They changed the value for each person here to yes instead of no. So only the one with yes will be produced. So in that case, they upload the same Excel file every time, and they also only take care of the ones that are going to be printed. And you can also have different templates here for if you want to have some people may have a different layout on their cards than others, so we can pick up different place content templates from this variable.
Mm-hmm.
Oops. No, now they're ready. Something heavy was going on in the other one. So what this flow now did that I showed you, it makes 2 different kind of products depending on which sheet the data is on. So this one creates a leaflet with some data on it, and it also links images and makes a barcode and everything like that. So all this comes from values in the Excel file and run by place content.
Mm-hmm.
And we also make business cards at the same time with this QR code. So it's quite a simple flow that makes a lot of advanced stuff.
Okay.
But what I have also done is this app called Automatic Imposition. It started with a customer who had an Indigo, and they were running the HP SmartStream app for imposing to the Indigo. And that it works with opening InDesign and place PDF files on an imposition template in InDesign. And the problem is that it opens this document and it can only run one instance for at each time, so you cannot do multi-processing. And if there's a heavy document, it takes a lot of time and also can crash. Mm-hmm. So I suggested that we make an imposition for PDFToolbox and with some variables, so they can, because they had a big print job every day for one customer. It was some leaflets for A5 or A4, 1 or 2 page jobs. So I made an imposition template in PDFToolbox that with variables. So depending on if it was A4 or A5 or 2 size or 1 page, it chose different settings in the same imposition setup. And after that, I thought, well, maybe this will be some useful for other users as well. So from this, I started making this automatic imposition app that is mainly intended for digital printing. So there's a lot of settings in it. You can, first of all, select the 2 different sizes of print sheets. And booklet, small cards is business cards, and step and repeat, end up, and cut and stack. And depending on what you choose, you get different kind of settings for binding and how it should be folded, and you set up gaps and page creep if it's a folder and stuff like that. You can also position it differently on the sheet for automatic cutting machines that they might have after the digital press. So you can offset the imposition on the sheet so it fits the cutting machine. Mm-hmm. And if you make small cards, you can select how many cards on the sheet, also depending on the cutting process that they have. And if it's business cards, you can also select different stackings on that one. So and it works very well for and it's also very quick, since that PDFToolbox imposition engine is really quick compared to some other stuff. And
so it's an app on the App Store, but it uses the imposition engine of PDFToolbox in the background.
Yes, you have to have PDFToolbox installed as well. So and I was even asking for embedding just the imposition part of the engine from Callas into this app, but with a pricing system that Enfocus has, so that the only one who will make money on that deal will be Enfocus and not Callas and not me. So we skipped that. Yeah. But anyway, so you have to have PDFToolbox to run it. But it's I mean, even though that's a requirement, it's, if you compare to other solutions that are around, like quite imposing, that costs almost as much as just PDFToolbox does. And with PDFToolbox, you get a lot more stuff than just imposing. So
I think that's the thing. It's not, I mean, you're not going to buy PDFToolbox just for doing a step and repeat of business cards, but usually you use it for all sorts of things. So
yeah, but and also a lot of Switch customers already have have pit stop servers. So with that upgrade or cross-grade pricing, it's really even though they just want to buy it just for imposition to start with, they can soon discover other uses for it as well. I mean, there's a lot of other stuff that PDFToolbox does that PitStop doesn't do.
And I don't have to specify where PDFToolbox is in your app, right? It does the discovery automatically, I guess.
Yes, sort of. But if you have another version, it will the current version will look for PDFToolbox version 10.
Okay.
So you have to do the same thing as you showed with the.
Okay, you can also do set
part. Yeah. So you have to specify that anyway. But and also if you upgrade PDFToolbox, you have to do it, change it that way.
Yeah.
But it will automatically look for some versions if you have them.
Okay.
Another one I have done is that makes banners and
also using the imposition engine, I guess.
Yes. So this one is when you do print banners, you have to and if you want to glue them together, the back side and front side, or sew them together, you have to make some kind of arrangement. So this is the front page, and the back page looks like this. So it will, in this case, well, since everything is black, you don't see so much, but you can maybe look at the other one. As you see in this one, you have to place the back side on the front page.
Yeah.
For when they're folding it back together for the gluing or sewing. So this page is, as you see, that it's missing something here.
Yeah.
And that is placed on the other side down here. So this is done with the PDFToolbox imposition engine, and also makes it very quick for them to produce it. And you can also, in the settings, you can also make them up to 4 up, so you get 4 banners next to each other on a big sheet. So if you have a really big printer, you can print many at the same time. Another case I have for one customer just using the PDFToolbox Impose configurator. But in this case, they print. This is a customer of mine who prints some kind of postcards that the garbage company in one of the cities send out to the customers when they change the pickup schedule for the garbage truck.
Mm-hmm.
So, and what this print shop did in the beginning was that they made this manually. So what they get is this template with the backside and the front page, and then they get the data file that's supposed to be on top of this one. And the data file looks like this. So, and as you see here, this one is 1120 pages. It could be well, several thousand pages as well. So they took this page, placed it in the side document on top of the other one, and kind of boring job for one guy to sit and do that for 2 days or whatever it took for them. So this one just uses this, and we have the run list and the sheet config, and we also have the template file that's are in the bottom of it. So it will overlay, and what you get is this file. So you get everything, and now it's 2240 pages with everything like this, and it takes like 3 minutes for Switch to create this document instead of 2 days for one guy to make it manually.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's and the last one I have is a more complicated flow, but I'm not going to show everything in that one. But you were talking about the reports,
Mm-hmm.
and what this flow is doing is if there's an error or warning, it will send this an annotated PDF and XML data at the same time. So first with a PDF report with comments, just only for error and warnings. And we make an XSLT report that will use an XSLT file to convert the XML to HTML. So we get an HTML file out with the report. And also an XML, plain XML as well, for variables and controlling and stuff later on in the flow. And another great thing with PDFToolbox that is always not always mentioned is the report, language report. The report languages. Since you can get it in a lot of different languages, like Swedish in my example, and that's really appreciated by the customers, because their customers, it's easier for them to get the report when it's in their own language instead of English or whatever.
Actually, in PDFToolbox, I think starting from version 10, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe it's 11, I don't know. You can provide your own translation now as well for all the terms, or you could override some terms in the Swedish translation if you don't like them.
Yeah. There's a language file you can edit if you like, and also the possibility to make more up to 4 different reports it can be very useful. So this flow uses both the PDF commented report and the HTML report and an XML report at the same time for different kind of purposes in the flow. So this one is sending. We have a PDF review thing here, and what if there's an error or warning in the job, they in PDF review they see the report with all the errors marked with annotations.
Yeah.
So it's easier for the customer to really see what's wrong in it. And the HTML is used to send in the email that goes out. The report is already part of the email, so they in the email they get, they already see the warnings and errors they have to look for, especially if there's a big PDF, 48 pages or something like that, and there's an error on page 35. If they're just going to look for that in PDF review, they will most certainly miss that. So now they get notified about that from the HTML report that comes from PDFToolbox.
Okay.
So you can do a lot of tricks with that. There's another one up here that also uses PDFToolbox to, if the customer makes their own comments in PDF review, we can read them here with PDFToolbox. So they are read and sent as an email to the prepress operator, so they know what the customer asked for. Instead of open the PDF and scrolling through and find the comments that they made, they get an email that on page 13 there is something they have to change, and so on. And that is also XML that is produced from that comments that we read there. So that was the stuff I wanted to show you.
Cool, thank you. Any questions from anyone? Because we've passed our officially allotted time, I think, but people seem to stick around. So no questions. It's only Tuesday and you're all tired. Okay, thanks for joining. If this made you think of anything that you would like to see in an upcoming Café, don't hesitate to to let us know about that. Again, you can just post that in the Facebook group or send me an email. That works as well. So thanks for joining this one. I will see you undoubtedly at an upcoming cafe, and have a very nice evening.